Hey everyone, it is time for NiCHE Conversations, and today we are going to be talking to Sara Karn about historical empathy and how to teach historical empathy and how this relates to climate crisis education, and specifically talking about Sarah's chapter in this book, The Existential Toolkit for Climate Justice Educators. And I've read this book front to back, and I highly recommend it. Once Sarah joins us, we're going to be, talking about what exactly historical empathy is. We're going to be talking about how she teaches it in the classroom, etc. And I think it's a really important topic because, if we're not learning how to empathize with those in the past, then why are we learning history? Sarah has joined us, so I'm going to invite her in. Caroline is here, number one NiCHE Convo fan. Hello, Caroline. Hello, Sarah.
Hi,
Welcome.
Jessica. Thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can. You can hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great. Welcome to NiCHE Conversations. I am Jessica DeWitt, one of the editors here at the Network in Canadian History and Environment. And today I am joined by Sara Karn. Can you let us know more about yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Jessica. So I'm Sara Karn, and I'm a postdoctoral fellow in the Department of History at McMaster University. And my fellowship is actually supported by a SSHRC partnership grant project, Thinking Historically for Canada's Future. So I'm conducting research with other researchers and partners from all across the country on the state of K-12 history education in Canada.
Awesome. So we've worked together a bit in the past with your environmental education work.
Yeah.
And this time around in the spring, you wrote a new book post about this volume, which you didn't edit, but you have a chapter in it about empathy and care.
Yes.
And that's what we're going to be talking about today is that chapter and then just kind of that topic in general. So first off, what is historical empathy?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and sort of as I define it in the book in the most kind of straightforward way, is that it's a cognitive and affective process that involves attempting to understand the thoughts and feelings and experiences and decisions and actions of historical actors and keeping in mind their historical contexts. And when I say cognitive and affective, what I mean by this is that there are sort of certain cognitive tools like considering historical context and examining evidence at the same time as emotions and feelings are present. And so I think it's important to really state this explicitly because often historical empathy has been conceptualized as being more of a cognitive focus. But recently there's really been this embracing of the affective dimensions, and the affective dimensions in this case referring to both the feelings and emotions of the historical actors that we're trying to empathize with, but also our own emotions and feelings as we're doing this work. So it's important to kind of keep both of those in mind. And then if I can elaborate a little
Go
bit
for
more on what I mean by historical empathy is that it's not only about understanding the past better, but also understanding ourselves and other people in the present. So there's kind of this element of understanding other people, being open-minded, being attentive and listening to others, and then also taking time to reflect on our own worldviews and our own positionalities as we're doing this work. And so that's kind of my way of expanding upon it, bringing it into the present, and I think sort of setting up to show why I think that empathy is so important for doing this work, climate justice work.
I love that. And I love that you're pointing out like the emotional aspects of it. And last year I edited a series for NiCHE on emotional ecologies, and this has a lot of that intertwined into it. And to me, historical empathy is like so central to what historians should be doing, and so critical when getting other people engaged with history. Like when you have a personal connection, or you understand the way that you are connected to those that came before you emotionally as well as physically, etc. Like it just deepens the need for that knowledge, and it's just so critical. So I appreciate that you're doing this work. So how do you bring this idea to students, and how do you teach it?
Yeah, so I think that's a really great question. And, whether we're talking about K to 12 education in public schools, or we're talking about at the post-secondary level in the history classroom,
Mhm.
um, I think that, when as I've been teaching for the past decade or so, I think that a lot of what I've done has incorporated historical empathy, even if I haven't
Mhm.
always had that term to call it that. And I hear from other teachers too that it's similar, that they're doing these things without maybe
Mhm.
having that word or that term. And so I think that I first started thinking about historical empathy and empathy and that affective piece from when I was doing teaching for an organization called the Vimy Foundation. And so we
Mhm.
brought groups of high school students from all across Canada over to the First and Second World War battlefields in Europe. And so it was a really experiential learning opportunity. Students were engaging with place. There was a lot of emotions wrapped up in that, and being in those places where, war and devastation took
Mhm.
place so long ago, but you still see the environmental and human impacts of that today. And so that's always kind of how I talk about my entry into
Mhm.
empathy. And then I really like to incorporate it in everything I do in my teaching through teaching teacher candidates, so students who are studying to become K to 12 teachers.
Yeah.
And so I've done some teaching at both Queen's and at Laurier in environmental education. And so some of these types of activities, if I can give a little snippets, I
Please
guess,
do.
from that are included in the chapter in the book. So one of them is, around this guiding question of how might the perspectives and the successes and setbacks of environmental activists in the past offer us stories of hope and resilience for today. So that's sort of the guiding question. And then I'll teach students about art activism, show examples of artwork by environmental activists from different decades, and then really engage students then in creating their own artwork to be able to
Mhm.
express their own emotions and represent environmental issues that they really care about today.
Mhm.
And then we've displayed those around on campus as well as a sort of awareness piece. So I think that's one example of how I've taught with empathy and care, which is the other aspect of the chapter.
Mhm. I appreciate you bringing up this idea that, a lot of people are doing this, or like maybe a majority of historians, I don't know, but having like this tangible term to really intentionally engage with it and be like, oh yeah, that's actually what I'm bringing to my classroom. That's what I'm bringing to my writing, etc., is so useful, I think. And when I stepped away from a book contract, but I was going to be writing for middle schoolers, and I was figuring out how am I going to get them to care, because that to me is the challenge of writing for youth, is that you don't have to think up a fancy thesis, right? You don't have to have groundbreaking research, but you do have to figure out how to make it interesting and how to get them to care. And to me, like this idea of historical empathy is um, so central to that, and central to really engaging with students who aren't perhaps inclined or don't like recognize themselves as being interested in these kinds of things. Yeah, it's a really useful term. I think all of us historians should be grappling with this. Um, to bring it back to the collection, which is
Yes.
for climate justice educators specifically, um, why would you say that this ability to empathize historically is an important skill for the climate crisis?
Yeah. So I kind of, I know that we talked a little bit about this, kind of leading into our conversation
Mm-hmm.
today, and the way that I wanted to describe empathizing historically is more of a way of being. And so it
Mm-hmm.
does involve skills, it does involve knowledge, it does involve disposition, certain dispositions. And it's sort of all of these different, skills and knowledge and just kind of ways of being in the world that all come together that
Mm-hmm.
will hopefully set students up to, be able to do this climate justice work now and in the future that's so desperately needed. And so, for example, some of these skills and dispositions, understanding others through listening to them. It requires, an openness to encountering other people and their perspectives and experiences. And this is, I think, it's really important to understand with surrounding like the disproportionate impacts of climate crisis on marginalized communities. We need to be able to, listen to other people and really seek to understand what they need. And then empathy also requires developing relations with others, including more than humans. And this is really important for fostering that deeper connection and sense of care with nature. And so, in my own history and environmental ed pedagogy, I'm emphasizing experiential learning and outdoor education, developing that sense of place. And so this really connects back to caring and having, better relationships with more than humans, and then we're more likely to make good decisions with the earth in mind. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then I know that you were talking a lot about that emotional connection to kind of engage students at that level. And I think that that can really help with, getting students to become more emotionally aware and develop some of the language to express themselves, especially when so many youth are, they're struggling with climate anxiety, and this uncertainty about the future can be really overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
And so talking through that, acknowledging it, and helping students to be in dialogue with one another over something that, can feel really overwhelming and isolating. Um, and then I think that this kind of leads me into talking about empathy, that it's not just enough to understand others, but also there needs to be an active component or an action component. And so, before we're able to take action, again, those skills that I've talked about already, your dispositions about listening and be acting in solidarity with one another. And so I think that's really important as well, to kind of move into this action oriented piece, which
Mm-hmm.
of course is very important for addressing climate crisis. And I should say that, youth are already doing this much better than all of us as well. So
Mm-hmm.
so just, continuing to support them in this work that they're doing already.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Sarah, for talking about this. And I encourage everyone to read this chapter, and as well as your broader work, because you do this in a lot of, I think it's one of your main things, right?
Yeah, yes, it is. Yes. Yeah, and this
Yeah.
was an opportunity for me to kind of bring together my work in historical empathy and then my work in kind of bringing together climate education and environmental education with history. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I've read this entire volume. This is the Existential Toolkit for Climate Justice Educators. I've read it cover to cover, and I recommend it to everyone. Even though I'm not like formally teaching right now, I found it like really useful for even just working out my own emotions, as well as, figuring out how to grapple with conversations with friends, family, etc. So I think everyone, not just educators, would gain something from this book. Yeah, thank you for joining me today, Sarah. So everyone check this out, and hope to hear from you again soon.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, Sarah. Take care.
Bye.